This is Will's Band of the Week for October 3rd, 2016. Hello, welcome to another edition of Will's Band of the Week. This is Will, along with Nicholas from the Melbourne Bureau.
Hello, and I'm coming to you from the west coast of Australia.
Right, so you're kind of in a what do we call this? Sort of a bureau, a sub-bureau of the Melbourne Bureau, right?
Yeah, and I'm kind of in sort of a holiday within a holiday. I feel like any regular listener would basically get the idea that I go on holidays about every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because almost every time we do a podcast, I'm on holiday somewhere.
Right.
So I am fortunate that I do go on holidays sometimes, and it just happens to it somehow matches up with when we're podcasting. So, visiting my brother in Perth, but my family and I have just driven down to a place called Margaret River, which is about 3 hours drive south of Perth, and Perth is the capital of Western Australia.
I was reading about Perth, and I think it's just totally fascinating, because Perth is, a city of about 2 million people? Is that right?
Sounds about right, yeah.
And it is, I read about this, that Perth is one of the most isolated major cities in the world. And the little trivia item that I read is that the closest city to Perth of 100,000 people or more is Adelaide, which is 1,300 miles, so what's that, about 2,000 kilometers away, right?
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the closest city is, Rio in South America, but it's funny. You do kind of feel it, when you're over here. It does sort of feel. I mean, it's a big sort of suburban city with towns and things like that around it. But you do kind of feel like you're a long way away from the rest of Australia.
And how would you describe? Is there any way to describe the feel of the city? Like, what kind of a city is Perth compared to Melbourne? Well,
one thing I've noticed is that it's really wide open, and it all feels like there's a little bit more space around everything. Mm-hmm. It's very flat, although Melbourne's quite flat. But you really notice how all the buildings are at quite a sort of a low level. So there's nothing really high, nothing really built up. So you see a lot of sky, and so everything has this kind of feel of being kind of wide open and a lot of blue sky. And the other thing is, when we were driving around, I was like, wow, is this windscreen on the car really clean or something like that? Because everything looks like it's really in focus. And my brother was saying that it might be because there's less pollution over here. So even the sort of quality of the air and the light is a little bit different to Melbourne. You really kind of notice, not that Melbourne's particularly smoggy, but you come here and it's like, wow, everything looks so bright and clear.
Interesting. The United States has and you made me think of this, the farther west you go, the more spread out everything is. So the western cities tend to be completely just, bigger distances between buildings and just wide open spaces. And the farther east you go, everything's kind of crammed together. So, yeah. But I don't think of Melbourne as being really super crammed together, right?
Well, probably not compared to some cities in America, but
right.
It's certainly pretty. It's pretty. Oh, what am I trying to say? I want to say suburban, but that doesn't really mean anything. There's a lot of. It feels like there's a lot of people and a lot of concrete and a lot of roads and a lot of cars, and definitely feels kind of busier and more, lots of people, lots of buildings at times.
What about public transportation? in Perth? Does everybody drive around by car, or they have a good public system?
It seems like everyone drives around in cars. There are buses. I think there might be some little trams right in the city. As you can hear, I'm not really much of an expert on Perth. I've sort of visited here a few times, but it's not like I've really spent a lot of time here, so I feel like I'm always a bit of a visitor.
Well, we always have to, every time we have you on, we have to get a little bit of Australian education. So
yeah,
I think that's good. So I have a little note as it relates to Australia. I don't know if you listened to I don't know if you heard the podcast last week that I did with Grant, but we talked about an Australian band, and it turns out we mispronounced their name. The band is called Chook Race, but we called them Chook Race because we didn't know what that word meant. So, like, right. I guess a chook is a slang for a chicken, right? We don't know that term here.
No, that's correct. So you've worked it out. Yeah, we say chook. So if you're having a roast chicken in Australia, you might say, "Oh, we're having a roast chook." Or if you're running around and you're being a bit crazy, you'd be like, you're running around like a chook with its head cut off.
Great. That's a good one. I love that. So both Grant and I felt kind of bad for mispronouncing that. But, you got to allow yourself to be educated, and you have to allow yourself to be wrong sometimes. Even, as rare as it is on this podcast, occasionally we get things wrong. So,
and anyway. I'm sure the band would have been thrilled just to be talked about on such a well-respected international podcast.
Right. It probably pretty much made their career. So, yeah, they've been touring around the U.S. even, and they came as close as Chicago. And this is a funny thing. I was actually in Chicago on the night that they played in Chicago, but I was seeing a different band. It's like completely crazy coincidence. So I didn't get to see them, but hope to at some point because I think they're great. Well, do we have any exciting music news or live reports? Did you see anything in the Perth indie rock scene?
I know that there's a Neil Diamond tribute show touring at the moment.
Well, but you didn't go see him, huh?
It was sold out. I lined up for tickets, and then I just missed out. I couldn't believe it.
It's too bad. Too bad. So it's got to be difficult for bands to come to Perth, right? I mean, you'd have to go so far. It's just crazy, right?
It is a long way. So, they do get bands touring here, but, yeah, it wouldn't be as many as in Melbourne or Sydney and that sort of side of the country.
But as a result, they must have a good local scene, right?
See, when you start asking me these kind of questions, I immediately feel really inadequate as a podcaster because my knowledge is suddenly zero. I mean, what I do know is that there's definitely been bands over the last, even, for the last 20 years, there's been great bands come out of Perth, and I guess what they do is, as they get bigger, they tend to move to the eastern states of Australia. Yeah, there's definitely been some great indie rock and some great sort of more rootsy, acoustic-y, folky sort of artists that come out of Perth as well. So, definitely some great artists that are born out of Perth. Yeah,
I was thinking that if you were from Perth, you would move to either Melbourne or Sydney for indie rock stardom, right?
It's a bit like moving to Brooklyn.
Right, exactly. That's what I had in mind. So, yeah, I'm looking at the map right now. It's amazing. Like, it's really cool. Like, Perth is just way over there. It's crazy.
Way on the left-hand side.
Yeah, yep. It's a big distance. So anyway, it's like really super cool that you are... Now I've got to find this place where you are right now. Let's see, I see...
So Margaret River. So go down from Perth.
Yeah, I see it right now. I'm going to click on it on the Google map.
Yeah,
there it is.
I'll just go outside. I'm looking out the window, so... Can you see me waving to the satellite above us?
I should be able to. I was thinking that, right now you have...
It's a bit cloudy.
You have the Google map that has still photos, but it's only a matter of time until the Google map will have just a live photo, right? And you'll be able to just walk outside and we'll be able to see you. But I can't quite do that, but that's really cool. That's just super cool that you're coming to us from there. I just think it's amazing. So, all right. I did see Car Seat Headrest last night, and you know who opened for them?
Oh, awesome.
Actually, it wasn't last night. It was Tuesday night, 2 nights ago. Lucy Dacus opened for them.
Oh, man, that would have been great.
And then
what a double bill. And two bands, two artists that I love.
And our local favorites, Trophy Dad, were the first band, which was good too. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
What was Lucy Dacus like?
Well, she was kind of laid back. It's like she came on and she played like a 4 or 5 minute song just by herself with a guitar, and then the rest of the band came on. And sometimes when she's mellow, she's just a little too mellow for me. But when she had her band, rocking, they sounded pretty good. I think it was pretty. It was pretty well received. It was a big crowd. Car Seat Headrest has gotten big. Like he's like garnered like this big following now. Do you know how sometimes bands get a big following and you kind of feel like their following kind of passes you by, like their crowd is almost too enthusiastic and they've passed you by, right? I mean, I kind of felt that way. Like the majority of the crowd was kind of more into it than I was. So I kind of liked him more when I saw him a year ago at the small venue, The Frequency. But it's still good. He's put together a very good live band, and it's pretty solid, and he's doing well. So that's pretty cool because he's a classic indie rocker who started on, recording, putting 10 albums out on Bandcamp or whatever. It's a cool way to do it. I talked about all this, and I never played the live report jingle. So all right, this is a low key live report, I guess. So, and you didn't scout out any indie rock bands in Perth other than trying to get into the Neil Diamond tribute show. So I guess that's it for our live reports, huh?
Yeah, I mean, there was a guy playing a harmonica in a little shopping mall, and he was going to plugged into an amplifier with a backing track, and I gave him about $2.50.
Well, that was nice of you to do that. All right, very cool. He doesn't have anything up on Bandcamp though yet, right?
I don't think so. It has reminded me. I did see, speaking of bands touring, so Dinosaur Jr. are coming out to Australia in January, and they're actually coming out to Perth. So I'm sure Perth indie rockers are going to love that. But they're playing it early January, and so unfortunately I'm not going to be able to go because it's Dinosaur Jr. and my procreation tendencies are in line. And you're probably thinking, what the hell am I talking about? So when our son Fox was born, I actually had a ticket to go to see Dinosaur Jr., but then when the gig rolled around, it was like, oh, I can't go to this. It was like a week after he was born, and we were at home with our new baby. Yeah. So we're quite excited because we're having another baby in coming up in January, and it's exactly when Dinosaur Jr. are touring. So I'm going to be at home with my two little boys, maybe listening to Dinosaur Jr. on CD and thinking, I hope everyone's having a good time at the gig.
Oh, well, that's exciting. Congratulations. And
Thank you.
It's also very cool that they're in sync with Dinosaur Jr. too.
Yeah, their touring schedule and how often my partner and I pop out a little baby. It's we're right there.
Another little rocker for Fox to hang out with. That's very cool. All right, so we have a lot of music to talk about. Should we start talking about it now?
Let's do it.
I wonder how much time we've taken up already. I'm just going to check here. Not too bad.
15 minutes or something?
Yeah, it's going to be within reason, I think. All right, so I wouldn't say debate, but we discussed in pre-production the order in which we should talk about these bands. And there's one that's a little bit of a downer, and I thought, let's get the downer out of the way first so we can end on a more positive note, right? Yeah, so we're going to talk about the new Nick Cave album. Now, I don't have like a big background with Nick Cave. It's kind of like one of these artists I've always respected, but I've never really been like a person who like immerses himself in Nick Cave albums. And I know that Barrett couldn't be here tonight. He has some comments about the new album that he sent us.
Good.
And I know you've got some background with Nick Cave too, right?
Well, I do. I wasn't sure whether I'd mentioned it, but growing up in sort of regional Victoria, a couple of hours out of Melbourne, as a young teenager, I would listen to the local community radio station, a bit like a college station, I suppose, in America, a station called 3BBB. And so these community radio broadcasters would love Nick Cave. So this is like in the mid to late 80s. They'd be playing Nick Cave and talking about how much they loved him. And at the time, I just thought, oh, this is terrible. How come everybody likes Nick Cave? Everyone loves Nick Cave. Oh, it's just this awful, awful music. So I always sort of, from an early age, had this sort of association with just like not liking him and kind of wondering why everybody else liked him. And then as I got older, I kind of appreciated him a bit more. And one time I actually did get to see him. Well, I've seen him a couple of times live, but I saw him. He did a tour about 15 years ago. It was just him and a piano playing his songs. So that was quite beautiful, really. And I still struggle to get my head around how big he is, because he's obviously massive, particularly, I guess, in England and Europe. But he's also, Johnny Cash has covered one of his songs, and he's obviously like one of these artists that's just hugely respected. And it's just hard. Do you ever get that, like with someone who's been around a long time and everyone loves him and his albums are all heralded by the critics, but you kind of wonder, how big is he in the kind of scheme of other big artists in the world?
Right.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It's sort of hard to gauge sometimes, really.
Sometimes.
Yeah. So, well, he's got a new album, and it's got this background that's just horribly sad. That
it's true.
His 15-year-old son fell off a cliff and died in the summer of 2015, so a little over a year ago. And apparently he was in the middle of recording this album. So you can't, the album sounds very sad, right? So you can't tell how much of it was, apparently most of it was written beforehand is what I read, but not all recorded, so you don't really know how much it was all influenced. But then when you think of it in that context, it's kind of difficult to listen to, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually was sort of afraid to listen to this album. And I would I'd start listening to a track, and then I'd stop it and be like, oh no, I can't do it. It's too dark. It's too intense. And I'd keep going back to it and be like, oh no, I can't do it. And it was because of those associations with him, like having a son who died, and thinking, oh man, this album is just going to be torturous. Apparently there's a film that was basically kind of like a documentary film that was made to capture everything that happened around the album being made, to sort of explain the context and themes of the album without Nick Cave having to do interviews with the media, basically. So there's a movie that's just been put out called One More Time with Feeling. That's the name of this album. That's the name of this film that's been released at the same time as this new album. So I assume that kind of goes into exploring the death of his son and how that influenced the album and all of that.
Right. Our Ipswich correspondent Craig saw that movie, and
yep.
Yeah. So we maybe should have gotten him on the podcast. We could try calling him now, but I think it's about 2:30 in the morning in the UK, so maybe not. And it played for one night here in Madison also. I guess Barrett knew about it. I didn't even know about it, but I listened to an interview with the guy who made the film, and he said that they sort of intended it as just a one-off thing. They were going to show it once, and then it was just sort of going to be an event. So I have a feeling it'll get shown more, and I was hoping that I'd be able to see the movie before listening to the album and, being able to discuss it, but there is no foreseeable time that it's going to be shown again. So plus it's going to be so darn sad, right? It's just terrible. So well, anyway, we should play some of this, right? The album is called Skeleton Tree. Do you want to make a pick?
Sure. Let's go with Girl in Amber. And I sort of found this song strangely addictive after finally starting to listen to this album. I actually sort of warmed up to it. And you can tell me which 80s TV show theme this song might remind you of.
Okay, here it is, Girl in Amber.
since 1984. The phone, it rings, it rings no more. The song, it's been spinning now since 90. And if you wanna bleed, just bleed. And if you wanna bleed, just bleed. And if you wanna bleed, don't breathe a word. Just step away and let the world spin. And now and turn, you kneel, lace up his shoes, your little blue-eyed boy. Take him by his hand, go moving, spinning down the hall. I get lucky, 'cause I tried again. I knew the world, it would stop spinning now since you've been gone. I used to think that when you died, you kind of wandered the world in a slumber till you crumbled, were absorbed into the earth. Well, I don't think that anymore.
Well, that was the track I was going to pick too. Girl in Amber.
Yeah, and so do you know what 80s TV show I was talking about?
I couldn't come up with it. I tried.
Twin Peaks.
Okay.
You know the theme song to Twin Peaks?
I didn't watch it, so I wouldn't have known. But I'll believe you.
Well, similar kind of couple of chords that it's sitting on in the verse there. It's maybe a tenuous kind of association, but it was there for me. Anyway.
I think that having the female backing vocals just adds a little bit of a relief to it a little bit. Right?
Yeah,
and
it sort of softens it a bit, doesn't it?
Right. So I think the songs that have those female backing vocals are a little bit stronger. At least they're easier to listen to. And plus, it's a really good melody, right? If you decide you're going to immerse yourself in it, that's definitely a good one, I think. So we did have Barrett had a couple of comments. He couldn't make it tonight, but I said he should send some written remarks. So
yep,
he did. He said he thinks this Nick Cave album is very sad, very, very sad. He said it reminds me, he says, of some of his 90s output, the quieter stuff. The thought of losing a child is completely impossible to fathom, and I can only imagine wishing to be dead myself. I'm listening to Distant Sky, and I can barely hold it together. That's my song pick. That's what Barrett says. And I agree with him. That was my other song pick, so let's play it. Distant Sky.
Let us go now. My one true love. Call the gas man. Cut the power out. And we can set out. We can set out for the distant skies. Watch the sun. Watch it rising in your eyes.
Let us go now, my darling.
That's a Danish singer named Elsa Torp on backing vocals. Apparently classically trained. I'm not sure how she knows Nick Cave, but that's pretty effective, I would say.
Yeah, I really like her voice too.
So yeah, kind of sad, right?
Oh, look, it's it's very fragile. It's very beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to kind of not think about what Nick Cave's going through listening to these songs, and I guess that's why I was kind of afraid to kind of get into this album. But yeah, like I said, when I finally did sort of feel like I was in kind of an okay mood to listen to it, it wasn't quite as I thought it might be. Too much to listen to, but it actually it wasn't. Once I kind of started getting into it, like I mentioned, it's kind of really grown on me. This album, it's a beautiful album. Yeah,
I had a pretty much similar experience. Like I was actually telling Grant that, hey, I've got to listen to this album for the podcast, and I'm just kind of dreading it. I don't know if I even want to, but But once you just listen to it, it's okay. And I think it's great that musical artists can do something like this, right? Just play music to express whatever they're experiencing, and we as listeners can decide whether we want to immerse ourselves into it or not, right? But it's worthy. It's good.
Yeah, I mean, are we? Do you mind if I pick another track?
No, I don't mind at all.
So track 5 is one called Anthracene. I'm not going to pretend that I know what that word means, but I thought, particularly the very first bit of it had an almost Radiohead-esque kind of production value to it. This kind of like the drums, but this kind of noisy loop thing that happens at the start kind of reminded me a little bit of Radiohead. But when Nick Cave comes in with his voice, you kind of realise, he's such a dominant kind of force that everything that he does on any of his albums or any of his bands, it always sounds like him. And it's, I kind of forget that because you're kind of so used to it. But this track is maybe an example of that.
Okay, track 5, Anthracene.
All the fine wind is gone, and this sweet world is so much older. The animals pull the night around their shoulders. Flowers fall to their naked knees. Here I come now, here I come. I hear you've been out there looking for something to love. The dark frosted shelves at the edge of the tree. It's alright, it's alright. Well, you turn so long and lovely, it's hard to believe that we're falling now in the name of the Anthracene. We lose. It's our bodies that fall when we're trying to rise. And I hear you've been out looking for something to love. Sit down beside.
Okay, you're totally right. The percussion at the beginning sounds totally like Radiohead, and then it just totally gets taken over and it becomes a total Nick Cave, right? So that's the album.
Yeah, but if you took his vocals out and put Tom York, could it sound just like Radiohead, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yep. I mean, not with the same, like, it would have to be sung in a Tom York higher register, right? But I think it could be. But yeah. if he put his own stamp on it.
Yeah.
But, okay, so the album is really, technically, it's Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So whoever those Bad Seeds guys are, they must be playing on the album also. And the album is called Skeleton Tree. And, so Barrett had another story about Nick Cave. Now, Barrett,
right.
he gets these brushes with fame, and he's really humble, so he doesn't like to talk about them. Others, like me, we'd be like blabbing it like crazy, like, hey, I had a brush with fame, right? So, we've talked about Barrett having My Morning Jacket in his coffee shop, and I love to bring that one up. But Barrett told us that he went to see Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds in Chicago in 1992, and at that time they were his and his wife's favorite band. They somehow got backstage, met up with the band, and went out to eat with the band.
Wow.
Yeah, and Barrett thought that he mentioned this before when we talked about the last Nick Cave album, but I don't think so, because I don't remember hearing this. So he said this was his best brush with fame, and he can't help but tell the story again. So there you go. That's Barrett's story that I had to tell for him tonight. He hung out with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So that's kind of cool. But I bet that kind of gives him, a different kind of a feeling about this whole album, right? If you've met the person, it would be even freakier, like, to have this tragic story and this sad album, right?
That's right. If you've seen Nick Cave eat a bowl of spaghetti from across the table, changes things, really, doesn't it?
Right. Absolutely. All right. So I guess that's what we've got on Nick Cave. So maybe we can move on to slightly happier music, right? Although
Let's do it.
There's always got to be a little dark undercurrent, right? I think, like most music that I like, there's got to be at least a little bit of a dark undercurrent. So let's talk about Chris Staples. And first of all, I've got to give our fellow podcaster Chris credit, because he first brought Chris Staples to my attention about, a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. He had an album called American Soft, and it was a really good album. And he just came out.
Totally.
Chris Staples has a new album out just now recently called Golden Age. And according to the streaming service here, his genre is singer-songwriter. I don't know if that's good or bad. He does sing and he does write songs, so I guess we can call him that, right? Let's call him.
I've always had a problem with that term singer-songwriter, because technically John Bon Jovi is a singer-songwriter.
Like, everybody's a singer-songwriter, right? And
that's right.
It also makes it sound like it's just like some guy with a guitar, right, without a band. And Chris
Chris Staples, it always just sounds a bit boring, a singer-songwriter.
Yeah, and Chris Staples has a full band, and plus he's got reverb on his voice, so it should at least be singer-songwriter with reverb, right? I think that makes him better. So I know that you mentioned to us like a month ago that you were excited about this album coming out, so I thought, okay, Nicholas is going to like talking about this. So one of us should make a pick. Who's going to go first?
Well, I would love to choose this song that he called Cheap Shades, that he actually put out as an EP towards the end of last year, and I think I popped it on my top 10 of last year. But it's a nice little intro to the album, I reckon. So let's go with that, if that's okay. Cheap Shades, track 4.
Mom went into labor in the middle of the night. Had my dad worried, but I came out right. They made some claims about the dead. Repeated words the ancients said. They drank some wine, they broke some bread, but nobody asked me, nobody asked me. The morning sun is gonna wake me, or from the garden gonna bake me. No fast talker gonna take me anymore. I used to be a sharp young thing. Had a bell waiting for.
That's Chris Staples. He's originally from Pensacola, Florida, and I think he lives in Seattle now. So
Yeah, that's right.
he gets around the U.S. That's kind of far. I wonder what's closer, Melbourne to Perth or Pensacola to Seattle? Trivia question for all of you out there.
I read that when he moved to Seattle, he got one of the first things he did was get a library card so that he could borrow 100 CDs at a time from the local library.
That's a good trivia item.
This is the kind of in-depth music journalism that I get paid so highly to do.
Yep. When you've reached our level, it's a pretty high level.
It's pretty high.
Yeah. So that's Chris Staples.
And before we go on, I want to just reiterate what you were saying before. Props to our own Chris, because this is a good example of one of the many artists that I've been turned on to from your podcast that I've just loved. You know, I just love Chris Staples. So yeah, thanks to our own Chris for introducing me.
Yeah, good. Hopefully somebody else has the same experience. So,
Yeah.
All right, I've got a pick. I really like the next track, number 5, Full Color Dream.
In a full color dream, you were there, and you followed me up the golden stair. We ceremonially kissed, territorially pissed on everything that I could find. Like I could somehow stop time. And I remember the things that never happened, and I've forgotten all the things I clearly did. The warm summer rays cooked our skin for days. We fell asleep under the shade. Oh Lord, we had it made. The earth will spin beneath your feet. Your shadow stretches down the street. Calendar pages fly. 10,000 crows will take the sky. The earth will spin beneath your feet. Your shadow stretches down the street. Calendar pages fly. 10,000 crows will take the sky.
It's folky, but it's kind of dreamy, right?
Yeah, there's always those nice little kind of guitar licks that he's got in there as well. I really like how kind of solid his rhythm guitar is, but then just as we were fading out there, you hear those nice little kind of clean-toned melodic guitar solos. It's really nice.
Yeah. Yep.
Does this remind you of Beck a little bit? Does it remind you of any Beck's more acoustic-y kind of adult contemporary sort of stuff?
Sure, a little bit. Yeah, a little like the most recent Sufjan Stevens too. I think it's folky, but it's dreamy folky.
Yeah, the thing I kind of like about there's lots of things I like about Chris Staples. It kind of, when I listen to it, it makes me feel okay with myself and sort of satisfied. So it's nice to have music that makes me feel like that. I don't know why that is. It just does. But in terms of it sort of sounding like Beck or even, someone like Sufjan Stevens, like it doesn't sound over-important. Sometimes I think maybe someone like Beck kind of sounds over-important, but Chris Staples never sort of sounds over-important. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Where I'm going with that?
Yeah, it's kind of unassuming, right?
Yeah.
I remember when I listened to his last album, and I remember when I saw, like, I don't know if it was like just a photo of him or a video of him playing, he looks so normal. He just looks totally like a regular guy. And it's almost like surprising how much like a regular guy that he looks, which I think is kind of cool. I'm not sure why I had that reaction.
But that sort of that normalness also comes through in his music, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. So I'm thinking you're going to have another pick. So what's that going to be?
Hey, I'd love to go with a track that tell me, and I guess this kind of idea of him being a normal guy. Tell me if this kind of like white middle-aged male funk. All right, I know that might sound like a terrible sort of collection of words there. White middle-aged male funk. Whether it kind of comes through, but in a good way. And particularly have a listen to the drum sound on track 11, Dog Blowing a Clarinet.
Don't be afraid of who I used to be. I hate him too, he wasn't me. I can change just like anybody can. I can change just like any other man. I did some stupid things because I didn't know who I really was. I can change just like anybody can. I can change just like any other man. Long before we even met, I had a vision that I can't forget. Dog blowing a clarinet in the Florida sunset. I can see that you don't believe I got nothing up my sleeve. I can change just like anybody can. I can change just like any other man. Am I Jekyll? Am I Hyde? Will you ever be satisfied? I can change just like anybody can. I can change just like any other man. Long before we even met, I had a vision that I can't forget. Dog blowing a clarinet in the Florida sunset. Long before we even met, had a vision that I can't forget.
Chris Staples. Yeah, it's a good one. I have nothing.
Are you into white middle-aged male funk? Well, because I am.
I think I'm generally not, but that song I think is totally decent. Yeah.
So, as I was also doing some of my in-depth music journalism, I discovered that recently Chris Staples quit his full-time job in construction. So, if you like Chris with an acoustic guitar strapped on, well, normally he's got a tool belt strapped on.
Right. It's pretty amazing and not necessarily a good thing how many of these indie rockers can't do this as a full-time thing, right? The music thing.
Well, I always wonder that when you kind of hear about these bands that they move to this city and then they get, their albums get put out by this label and then they do a tour. I always wonder, so I always kind of wonder, so how much money are they actually making? Do they actually make any money? But, somehow they kind of seem to do it. But no one ever talks about any other jobs. So I love the fact that on his bio, he's talked about the fact that he quit his full-time construction job to focus on carpentry. So he obviously does. He's got a normal job as well as putting out all this great music.
I think it'd be really cool if, we needed some work done on our house and we could just call Chris Staples and say, "Hey, Chris, we need a little remodeling work." And then I could say, this bathroom was remodeled by Chris Staples. That'd be totally cool, right? So
I could have a bookshelf. I wouldn't mind a bookshelf.
Yeah, everybody can use something. So maybe we should be doing that, right? Of course, you'd have to have travel expenses, and then we'd have to put him up in a hotel. I don't know. It could maybe be done. We'll talk to him about it when he comes by on tour. I looked at his tour dates, and he's got very limited tour dates. He's got some West Coast U.S. and then U.K., I think. But there was no Midwestern U.S. or Australian tour dates, so we'll have to wait and see. He'd be fun to see, right?
I reckon it'd be really good live.
Yep. So I think we're both thumbs up on the new Chris Staples album, Golden Age. Have we done that justice?
Yeah, I mean, it's sorry. We often kind of do this where you start saying something, but I think because I've got half a second's delay, I kind of miss the little gap, so then I start just talking over you constantly.
Okay, we'll start this one over again. Okay, here we go.
I was just going to say, isn't it great that that in this world we can still listen to an album of songs that were that were just sort of written by this one guy, and that it's quite a simple thing, this thing of a song. And I guess listening to particularly Chris Staples' album just makes you think, it's great just to listen to these, these sort of new songs. It's just this one guy that's written these songs, and you can just fully appreciate them and just enjoy this world in which we live in. It's filled with all these great songs.
Right. So maybe that's what singer-songwriter should mean, even though it's not how it's really used. But it's the ideal for what should be a singer-songwriter. A guy writing good songs. Chris Staples, the album is called Golden Age, so check it out. Should we move on to our next band?
I feel like we're building up to a celebration of indie rock.
Celebration of rock and roll, absolutely. Yeah, indie rock veterans, right?
Yeah, so this is a band that we haven't even said who it is. Should we say who it is?
You can just build up to it. We'll build up to it.
Well, so this is one of these bands who I kind of I sort of know who they are, kind of, but they're I've been hearing their music probably for 20 years being played on the radio. I've never owned any of their albums. I probably wouldn't have been able to name one of their songs, but I was aware of them in the world. So it was great to have the mission of checking out their new album. And I've got to say, I really, really like it, and it's made me. I've now got to go back and explore their entire back catalogue.
Very good. Yeah, it's always fun to discover a band like that, right?
Well, it's the classic move for me. I usually get into bands about 10 or 20 years after everybody else.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all right, because you're not concerned with being cool, right?
Well, but on the other hand, I am still pretty cool. So,
right. It kind of comes naturally to you, but it's not like you need it. You don't need it. It's just, it's there, right? So let's lead in. This band is from a city called Bellshill, Scotland. So I like bands from Scotland. I've got Scottish roots. Bellshill is, I'm looking at a map here, looks to be not very far from Glasgow. Almost like maybe suburban Glasgow. So you probably could get away with saying they're from Glasgow, but I think they say they're from Bellshill, so that's kind of cooler. Just to, be more specific. Oh, do we mention the band yet? They're called Teenage Fanclub. I have a little bit of background with Teenage Fanclub, and it's funny because Well, I'm gonna give a little more detail on this after we play a track, I think. Why don't we let's play something, and then we'll go back and I'll have some comments. The new album is called Here. They are indie rock veterans, and they're aging rockers, but of course we love aging rockers on the podcast, right?
Of course.
All right. I'm just going to go ahead and make a
track.
Yeah, let's play track 2 called Thin Air. Okay, that's Teenage Fanclub. I was kind of wondering whether I should have made this comment before I played this, because this, I kind of go way back with Teenage Fanclub. I did have a couple of actual CDs. Remember when people used to buy CDs? I used to buy those things back in the 90s. So they were kind of a power pop band, and I kept thinking of them as a power pop band, but they kind of don't have the power now. They're kind of a pop band without power, And so I have to readjust. And when I readjust and realize that they're kind of a different kind of a band, I like them, but they're not really a power pop band. So I had this weird sensation listening to this album that I wanted to grab a hold of the mixing board, and I wanted to turn down the vocals. I wanted to turn up the guitars and the drums so that it rocked a little bit more, because the songwriting is good, the melodies are good, but I kind of just wish it would just rock a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're all getting a bit older, Will. That's what this is making so obvious, and that's probably why you're having a reaction against it, because you don't want to face the fact that we're all getting older.
Right.
And the guys in Teenage Fanclub, they're also getting older,
right.
So they rock a little more gently.
Right.
And it's okay to rock gently. But
sure.
I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And in my in-depth investigation over the last few days, I sometimes have you ever looked up an album on Amazon and then you go to the customer reviews?
Yeah.
Sometimes I do that because I quite like it, because it's just like normal people who like a band and then they write about it. So it's not like some kind of cool indie rock journalist.
Right.
You're just getting a kind of a normal person, and particularly for a band like this, it's sort of like, I just want to know, like, from someone who knows a lot about Teenage Fanclub and, was into them in the 90s, like, where does this kind of album sort of sit? And one guy was talking about how there's kind of like two phases of the band, and I think what you're talking about kind of fits into this idea that, like, phase one was basically from when they started in like 89 or 90 to about 97, and they did about 6 albums. And then they had a little break, and they came back for phase 2, which started in about the year 2000. And now this is about their 4th album in this second phase. So I kind of reckon that kind of seems to make sense, because when I went back to revisit some of their sort of big albums from the mid-90s, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember these songs being really popular, and yeah, you're right, they kind of rock harder, and now they're kind of in this more sort of adult contemporary indie rock phase, which is I'm coming up with these really terrible combinations of words today. But it is kind of that like second phase of a band. So maybe that's what you're hearing as well. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Yeah, that's accurate, I'd say.
Should we listen to another song?
Yeah, let's do that.
Well, this is a song that definitely is very gentle. But that's what I kind of liked about it. I kind of liked how mellow a lot of these songs were. So this song I thought had a real almost a kind of a 70s AM radio vibe, or maybe even a little bit of an 80s sound. Do you remember the singer Alison Moyet?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So think of her when you listen to this track 11, With You.
Yeah, that was one of my top picks, too. I like it. I'm not sure if I get the Alison Moyet reference, though.
It's okay. I think a lot of the musical references that I come up with, I think they only really are true to me. Who knows? But I'm okay with that.
Yeah. It's good, though. That's, that's where I can, the mood of that is definitely meant to be kind of mellow. So when I hear that, that's not one where I want to grab the mixing board and make it more power pop.
Yeah.
I'm going to, what I think we should do? I want to, just for reference, so the listeners know what we're referring to, I'm going to go back and play one of the power poppy songs.
Great.
That are kind of my frame of reference. So hold on a second here. I'll find it. Okay, I found it. They had an album released in 1991 called Bandwagonesque. Remember I had this CD because the artwork on it is a big money bag. Big bag of money with a big dollar sign on it. And there's a great, catchy power pop song on this album called Star Sign. So I'm going to play some of that. It's got a long intro, so I'm going to cut in kind of in the middle. See, that's kind of rocking, right?
Totally. I mean, it's, that really just reminds me of that first half of the 90s. Their music, along with other bands who sounded similar, just got played a lot on community radio stations here in Melbourne. So, the sort of sound I'm really familiar with, but I probably never really paid that much attention, or, like I said, I never went out and bought their albums at the time.
Yeah, so if they would, I wish they'd rock a little bit more like that, even as aging rockers. So I missed that a little bit. So, I generally like the new album, but I wish they'd rock a little bit more. But here's another cool thing. You ready for this? They're coming to Madison in 3 weeks. Cool. They're going to be playing here. So I am virtually certain that I will go and see it. So it is going to be cool to see. Because I think, if they're a little bit on the mellow side on the newer album, I think the more rockin' side of that will come out live, right? And they'll play all the old rockin' stuff too. So
they'll play the hits.
Yeah, so I'm hopeful. So, is there another? Do you want to make another pick?
I'd love to. This is a good one. Track 7, The First Sight. Big kind of. I love the brass in this. It's got a huge sound. And there's also a great guitar solo from about a minute 30. So, if we can listen to it like into the guitar solo, that would be awesome.
All right, here we go. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, look, we were driving around in the car the other day listening to this album, and so my partner Finley, I was asking her what she thought of it, and a couple of different times she basically said, yeah, it's okay, it's just sort of in the middle, it's kind of that middle of the road sort of thing. So I can kind of see what she means. It is kind of, and it's a bit like what you were saying, it doesn't really rock as hard as their stuff from 20 years ago. And maybe I'm just middle of the road, I guess I'm going on record as saying that I really like this. And, yeah, I can kind of see what Finley means about it being kind of just kind of middle of the road. But, I like it. I just like it. And at the end of the day, that's what matters to me.
Yeah, I think it's well done. And I'm kind of excited to see it live because I think it's going to come to life a little bit more, too. Did you ever listen to a band called Midlake?
Yeah.
Because it's, they were kind of a sort of 70s revival, right?
I kind of find that stuff, I can listen to it once or twice, and then I'm sort of I don't want to listen to it anymore.
So there are bands that do that well, and there was one album by them that really caught me that I thought was great, called something like Trials of Van Panther or something like that, from around 2006 by Midlake, and I thought it was really well done. You might not be able to say that about their whole catalog, but it was a good 70s revival. So, and some of this album is kind of that way, right? It does have that 70s soft rock kind of sound, but pretty well done generally, I think.
Yeah, there's almost a bit of, floaty, psychedelic kind of, a little bit of a Pink Floyd thing, a little bit of a kind of a Beatles influence in some of the melodies. And, yeah, look, overall I find it really joyful. That's why I was saying before it's like a celebration of indie rock. And I kind of get that. I sort of feel like it's just got a really joyful kind of vibe, and it doesn't sort of feel like a bunch of middle-aged guys just kind of going through the motions. It's sort of like, wow, they're all great songs. And I was interested to sort of learn about how the three sort of main guys in the band are all songwriters. They all three of them sing their own songs, and they've also written some of the songs each on this album.
Yep. All right, did we do it justice?
Hopefully, yeah.
I think we did.
The listeners can decide for themselves.
Yes, they will. But hopefully they'll agree with us, because that's what they should do. Yeah. All right. Good. $0 worth? I think so.
I think so.
Well,
that's what we aim for.
It is, once again, an honor to connect with Nicholas from the Melbourne Bureau. And
look, it's a pleasure and a privilege as always. It's great fun having some albums to really dive into and explore, and I thank you, Will, and I thank the listeners.
Yes, and hopefully keep informing us of any new and interesting stuff that you find out about and are interested in listening to, or that you want to let us know about.
Cool.
The guy who told us that we pronounced Chook Race wrong is a guy on Twitter. He calls himself Hyper Brendan on Twitter. He also suggested that we listen to an album by a band called Scott and Charlene's Wedding. Do you remember that
yes.
band? Yeah, that's another Australian band, and
yeah.
I think I talked about them a couple of years ago, so I'm going to listen to that album. So that's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun to get recommendations like that. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. So I think they're, let's see, where are we? We're at the end of September. When this comes out, will be early in October.
Yeah.
And seems like October is usually a pretty good month for releases, and then it starts to really slow down because people are kind of like, okay, that's enough for this year, right? So we'll see if we need to do any specials at the end of the year. We'll probably have a few more weeks of good new stuff. Maybe there'll be like a Bob Dylan Christmas album or something like that we can talk about, right?
Anyone who's a singer-songwriter is okay in my books.
Sure. Yep. All right. Well, let's see. It's now 9:21 p.m. my time, which means it must be 10:21 in the morning in Perth, in the Perth area.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah, some beautiful sunshine coming through the trees in front of me.
And a beautiful...
we've got a fun day planned.
A beautiful dark night here. So, good. Well, I hope to interrupt you on a holiday again. That's always fun.
Yeah.
You're not, like, burning up in your car, are you? I hope not.
No, not doing that. Just sitting in our the little bedroom looking out the window at the moment. So
we've had some good ones. We had the one where you were across the street from the playground with the children frolicking, right?
Yeah.
And we had was that the same one where you almost died in your car? I don't know. There was one where you were like
it might have been. Yeah, that was a good moment.
I love it. Okay, you're willing to sacrifice. That's what we like. That's it proves your worthiness if you're willing to risk your life to be on the podcast.
Look, it's the lengths that we go to for the indie rock listeners.
Right. All right. I suppose we should sign off then, shouldn't we?
Yeah, we're just kind of we're searching for that last great thing that one of us says. And it's like, yeah, boom, and then you say, okay, we'll see you next week. but we haven't quite got that really great thing at the end that either of us have said.
Right.
You know, so that's okay. We're just kind of like winding down.
Yeah, I've got nothing. I'm not skilled enough. So, all right. All I've got is we'll talk to you again next week with another edition of Will's Band of the Week. Good night.
Good night.
You can subscribe to the Will's Band of the Week podcast using iTunes or any other podcast app. All of our podcasts are also available directly on our webpage, willsband.net. You can contact us directly by email to willsband@yahoo.com, on our Facebook page, or on Twitter @willsband. The Will's Band of the Week podcast is brought to you every week from Fourth Bedroom Studios in Madison, Wisconsin. Our theme music was composed by Grant and performed by Grant and Will. Thanks for listening.